he wanted a piece of advice that wasn't, you should talk to your wife.
Yeah.
Right. He was probably hoping for a, like, talk to the neighbor, address the neighbor. So he could be like, yo, stay away from my woman.
Because the last episode, when we were recording this, the last one we released was about how flirting isn't cheating. And I found a good question here.
Oh.
How do I stop him flirting with my wife? I'm really cross that another man keeps chatting and flirting with my wife. I'm worried that he'll push me over the edge and I'll blow my top. Every other weekend, we visit my wife's parents for Sunday lunch. For years, it was just the four of us, but 6 months ago, they started inviting their next door neighbours. My in-laws are very fond of the lively couple and regularly socialise with them. The trouble is the man clearly fancies my wife. He's always complimenting her and they have cosy little chats together. I don't want my wife to think I'm paranoid or controlling, but it's eating away at me. What should I do?
You are paranoid and controlling. Own it. I have questions about who these neighbors are. I mean, are these neighbors that she grew up with from the time she was a kid? So she knows them. And it's like, kind of like, you know, you have friends of the family that you call aunt and uncle, but they're not really your aunt and uncle, right? Like, what's the relationship there? Or is this another couple that the parents have just, that are the same age as the daughter? So I need to know more information about who this couple is and what their relationship is to the parents. However, he's there, right? Like, it's not like this is malicious because the guy is probably, they said neighbors, presuming that he's also got his wife there. So he's being flirty, if he's being flirty in front of his wife, and he may not be flirty because he did say the lively couple next door. So that may just be how they communicate. He may just be a lively, chatty kind of guy. And this guy's not accustomed to that. But also, if he trusts his wife, then what's the problem, right? He can see what's happening. He can see that, they may be having, and like, is this cozy conversation actually a cozy conversation? Or is it just like, oh, I'll help you in the kitchen?
Yeah.
So lots of unanswered questions. I do think he is being paranoid and being controlling. He can talk to his wife about it and say, listen, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable when you go off with him in these scenarios, see how his wife handles it, and then go from there. I don't think it's up to him to walk up to the guy in that brutish, hey, stay away from my woman, because that's not going to end well. He just needs to come to terms with the fact that people are potentially going to be flirting with his wife. And if he trusts his wife, then there's no issue to it.
Yeah, yeah. And like you say, it always comes back to that communication thing, because really you would have thought that from talking to your wife yourself, you'd get an idea for how she flirts, when she fancies somebody.
But he hasn't spoken to his wife because he doesn't want her to think he's paranoid and controlling. So he's going to be in, and there's a way for him to do it that wouldn't come off that way, right? There's a way for him to say, like, I'm not comfortable with this. How do you feel about it? What's your take on it? But instead of not talking to his wife, he's going to let this simmer and then eventually blow up on either his wife or this neighbor and kind of ruin everything because he's afraid of telling his wife, this is making me feel insecure. And I don't even think it's a matter that he doesn't want her to think he's paranoid and controlling. I don't think he wants her to think he's insecure about this, because it's a fear, right? Like, if he's one of those guys who's like, oh, I need to be the man of the house and not display any emotions, he doesn't want her to know that he's feeling a bit insecure. So he comes off as it's controlling and paranoid, although it kind of is, but it's also insecure. The end.
But like you say, that there is a way of doing it and not doing it, isn't there? You know, and I think that the knee-jerk reaction from a bloke is that you want to step in and be all gruff and unemotional and, you know, in the way that we think we're unemotional, but actually we're showing anger and control and paranoia, which are all emotions, you know? And the other thing is like, if you're married as well, I think you should feel comfortable telling your wife how you're feeling. And like, even if, I mean, depending on your style, you might want to say it bluntly and just say, look, this is making me a bit paranoid and I'm starting to feel a bit controlling and I don't want to feel that way. Can you help me through this?
Yeah. And that's, you know, it's interesting. So I started watching this new show called Will Trent, and it's based on a series of books by Karen Slaughter. And it's the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, right? It's a cop show. The one thing that is amazing about the way they've written the character in the show is that he is, you know, he's the police officer, you know, like detective. So he's that manly man, but he's always exceedingly well put together. And when he has emotions, he deals with the emotions, right? Like, he was having a moment. He called someone that he grew up with and he was like, listen, this is what happened. I'm having some feelings. I need some support. And it's not often enough you see men displaying those types of emotions in TV shows and in movies. And if it did, maybe then guys like this would feel like it's okay to talk about these feelings. It's okay to be vulnerable. So I'm glad to see that starting in media, but then all the men who didn't grow up with that, who grow up with the like stoic, swallow your emotions, right? Like the honeymooners, and like, I don't know if you had that show, but they would just kind of bottle everything up and then explode. And that's what this guy is on pace to do, because he's afraid of having a conversation with his wife in which he feels vulnerable and open.
And then it's one of the things is the way the stoicism itself and like being a stoic person is just so badly misrepresented in traditional media. And like, you're not really taught what it is at school. Like, you know, when you're taught things like religion and philosophy and stuff at school, they should at least tell you what this stuff is. And that like stoicism is about seeing that you feel emotional and accepting it, that you are emotional, and learning how to rise above that emotional reaction to things. But you still experience the emotion and you still express it, but it's about not letting it rule you. And then, but
and I think,
go
ahead.
I was just saying, then it gets translated into shows like that where they're like, shove it all down, we don't feel nothing.
And I think that's a really good point that you're making, is that the intent and the meaning behind that word has been lost over years, because the way people have used it, it's morphed from processing your emotions and, you know, rising above them to just don't experience any emotions. I think that's the misnomer. It's like, and I think it could also stem from people's perceived notions of how people are supposed to react in a certain situation, right? Like if you're at a funeral and you're not crying, people think you don't miss that person or you're not grieving. But it's like everybody grieves in a different way. Everybody displays their stoicism in a different way. But for somebody who doesn't understand what's happening inside that person, they may just like, oh, they don't feel anything. That's what stoic means.
Yeah. Do you want to hear the answer?
Absolutely.
I urge you to speak up. Take your wife to one side and explain you can't go. You can tell this isn't Deirdre, can't you? From
I was just going to say that when I swallowed my coffee. That's certainly not Deirdre.
Yeah. Take your wife to one side and explain you can't go on with things the way they are. She may not realize it, but her parents' neighbor, well, I don't agree with this bit, but she may not realize it, but her parents' neighbor oversteps the mark every time he corners her and flatters her. And it's really beginning to get on your nerves. You're not being silly or overly sensitive, but too often you've had to sit and watch him play the Lothario and you don't like it. It feels as if he's attempting to challenge you. No, you're not perfect, but you wouldn't act this way with his wife. Ask her to see things from your point of view. Maybe it would be better for all concerned if you spoke to your in-laws and changed this routine before feelings boil over.
You know what? I agree with you on the part that we disagree with. But I think she's not looking at there's a lot of, anytime somebody asks this question, they're asking it from their own perspective and they're trying to seek out a certain type of answer. So they may be missing some of those key details. Like for me, what sticks out a lot is the lively couple next door. Yeah. Right. Like if I were to describe somebody as lively, I would expect them to be gregarious and out there and outgoing. Right. Like, so it would be interesting to find out if the neighbors are like that with everybody. Yeah, exactly. And not just this guy's wife. It's like when I see those posts on Ask Am I the Asshole? People leave out so much detail. And then as they start answering questions in the comments, all of it comes out, or they start cross-posting it on different subreddits to try to get the answer they're looking for. Yeah. Like this guy really wanted something. He wanted a piece of advice that wasn't, you should talk to your wife. Yeah. Right. He was probably hoping for a like, talk to the neighbor, address the neighbor. So he could be like, yo, stay away from my woman. Yeah.
And I feel that the answer that this agony aunt gave kind of taught him to be avoidant almost with the last bit of advice at the end. Maybe it'd be better for all concerned if you spoke to your in-laws and changed this routine. And it's like, okay, so you're asking them to remove your and coddle
He's talking to, like, okay, she said talk to the wife, which is fine. Talk to the wife and then talk to the in-laws, but like never talk to the neighbor. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be confrontational. It could also be like, hey, it makes me a little uncomfortable when you talk to my wife that way in front of me. I just appreciate it if you just lay off a little bit. Right. And it's an uncomfortable conversation, but wouldn't it be more uncomfortable to say to your in-laws, we're not coming anymore if the other be there? Like you're creating tension where there doesn't have to be. Just have an uncomfortable conversation and be done with it. But also expect to be asked why, right? If someone said, Like it would be very possible for him to approach the neighbor and say, it makes me uncomfortable when you talk to my wife that way. And for the neighbor to say, well, why is that?
Yeah.
Because if the answer is like, well, it makes me insecure because I think you're hitting on my wife, then like he may not be, right? If he was hitting on his wife, he probably wouldn't do it in front of her husband and her parents.
Yeah. And his own wife.
And his own wife. Like, it just leads me to believe that he's just that kind of friendly guy. And the husband is now seeing what he wants to see, because he's probably just as lively and flirtatious with his wife and with the wife's mother, but he's not seeing it. He's just zoning in on what's happening with his wife.
Yeah, attention bias. And basically the avoidant response is encouraging this guy to ask 5 other people to change their life and their routines for his own sake and create
and because he's afraid to talk to one person.
Yeah.
Avoiding a situation doesn't make it get better.
No, never does.
No. It's like, so then if they stop doing this, is every time the wife goes by herself to visit her parents, is he going to be like, oh, the neighbor's going to be there, right? Like, it's just going to create a lot more.
And all of your all the stuff that's festering will leak out in unconscious ways that you won't even realize you're doing. Like, you'll make a snarky comment, or you'll have an unbidden thought about something, and you might look at daggers at the husband, from across the room. Yeah.
Communication, folks.
Yeah, it's fucking key.